So, please sit down and have a seat, especially don't walk in front of the camera. We're here again, and I just want to address the next thing happening in the program. We are standing at the last thing for today, but it's not the least thing. I'm so happy that I can introduce the next keynote session, where Wendy Craig will tell us about what we know about peer defending and how the research can inform prevention efforts. Bullying is a relationship problem that requires relationship solutions. This keynote session will summarize research on peer defending and translate this research into practice. And I'm so happy and proud to introduce Wendy Craig, Professor of Psychology at the Queen's University in Canada. Please give Wendy a warm applause and welcome, Wendy.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here, and good afternoon. As you can see, it's a bright, sunny midday here in Kingston, Ontario in Canada. I wish I was with you, but it's an honor to be here with you virtually. Today, I'm going to talk about what we know about peer defending and how the research can inform prevention efforts. So why am I focused on peer defending? Well, as Christina Samavelli and her colleagues in 1996 indicated or first described, that peers play a critical role in bullying. They're present in 85% of the episodes. And when they're present in bullying, they can either engage in behaviors that can support the bullying, so they can escalate the bullying, they can amplify the bullying, or more importantly, they can engage in behaviors that can stop the bullying and support the individual or the youth who's being victimized. Peer defending, not all peers who witness bullying defend. As I just mentioned, some of them are bystanders who escalate the problem. But how we think about those that step in, those who take pro-social actions to stop or defend bullying and support the youth who are being victimized, they can do it in different types of ways. So more recently, a student of mine, Laura Lamb, has identified 4 types of defending behaviors that we typically find. They are comforting, solution-focused, reporting or seeking help, or aggressive defending. So defending in a way that may not be pro-social, but it is defending another to stop the bullying. We know that when peers defend, it works. So that's another good reason to focus on it. So we know that they're highly effective. Our early observation work with Dr. Deborah Pepler found that when peers intervene, bullying stopped within 10 seconds, 50% of the time. So they're effective, more effective than adults. We know that when peers defend, there's less bullying in classrooms. So it's a way of decreasing bullying. And we know also from other research that the students, when they're defended, the students who are victimized benefit. That is that they report having higher self-esteem. The victimized students report having increased peer acceptance and popularity. So when peers defend, it works. We also know that many bullying prevention programs include components that attempt to change the bystander behavior. And those programs that include them in a review done in 2012, what they found is that bullying prevention programs that had a focus also on the bystander intervention were effective in reducing bullying. So in general, when peers intervene, it works as an individual strategy. When we include them in programs, it contributes to the overall program success of reducing bullying. But the issue remains, why don't all kids defend? And how do we engage more youth in that defending behavior? We recently did a virtual reality study in our lab. And what we did in this virtual reality study is we had students enter a virtual reality paradigm where we used the formerly known as cyberball paradigm. So kids entered a schoolyard in virtual reality, and 3 kids were passing a ball around, and 1 child was excluded. And the child who entered could watch the interaction, and they had an opportunity to interact online with the child who was victimized. And what we found is that of those bystanders who came into that virtual reality setting, only about 50% of them acknowledged that the victimization was happening, that socialization was happening, that is that the ball was not being thrown to one of those kids. And of those, only 33% then went on to defend. So my point here is many kids are present in bullying, not many are intervening, and we need to understand what are the characteristics that are associated with encouraging kids to become interveners or defenders. And to do that, we really need what we call a socio-ecological model of defending. And why we need this systemic perspective is that we need to consider each of the influences at each of the levels of the model. So for example, there are individual factors that are related to defending behavior. There are peer factors that are related. There's research showing that there are school and classroom factors that are related. Not so much research on community and not very much research on society and culture factors related to bullying. So to date, most of the research is focused on those first three levels. There's 2 reviews that have been conducted that really identify and talk about what are the key individual, peer, and school and classroom factors, one from Ma and one from Lamb in 2019. The thing is, though, that it's not just about the individual factors, it's about the interaction between the individual factors and those social contexts, the social context of peers and the social context of schools and classrooms. I'm going to take a minute, though, and just go through each of these levels of the models and how they're related to defending behavior. So the first 2 factors I want to talk about is gender and age. And what, in general, the meta-analysis have found is that more females than males are likely to engage in defending. And there's a nuance to that. That is that happens at younger grades, but not at older grades, as indicated by this graph, where the red are the females and the blue are the male interveners. So you see that more females are intervening at younger ages than males, but as they get older, that doesn't change. That is that males and females are both likely to intervene. So if you're a female, increased likelihood of intervening, but it's qualified by being at younger ages. So why is that? Well, it might be related to individual developmental processes. So such as with increasing age, there might be more important about what your peers are doing. You might be thinking about what your peers are doing. We know that at certain ages, there's a dip in empathy. And so kids may not feel as empathetic to the child who's being victimized and may not be likely to do it. There may be increased costs with age to defending. So this is an example where those individual factors might interact with peer norms or peer values, and we need to unpack that a bit more. The other thing that it might be affected by is the way that you defend. And what this graph shows is that the darker bars are the later adolescents, and the lighter bars are early adolescents. And what this shows is that 2 things. One, gender influences how you intervene. That is that girls who are early adolescents are much more likely to intervene by reporting than boys. And you can see that in the first bar. In the second bar, what you see is girls are much more likely at both ages to intervene by comforting. Interestingly, that trend gets reversed when we look at aggressive intervention. Boys are more likely to do it, and no difference on social solution-focused intervening. So in other words, how gender and age interact depends on how you intervene and the type of intervention. And there are also developmental changes and gender differences in who defends. Another individual factor that's been related to the increased likelihood of defending is empathy. And what we know in the research, and again shown through the meta-analysis, is that defenders tend to have more affective and cognitive empathy. That is, they tend to have more empathy that understands the experience of being victimized. Although this tends to have a small effect in the meta-analysis, we've also seen it in our own research. We've done some work where we've brought in youth who have a history of defending into the lab and put them in the MRI to take brain scans. What we do is while they're watching Cyberball, again, that computer game where someone's excluded and they're throwing around the ball and someone's not getting the ball after a period of time. And what we find in the MRI is that the individuals who have a history of defending, what you find is increased brain activation in areas that are associated with emotional empathy and perspective taking. So at a brain level, we see that kids who defend are more likely to demonstrate activation in areas associated with empathy. I've seen a few sessions at this conference talking about moral disengagement, and it's a really critical concept. And what we find, and what the meta-analysis research also finds, is that moral disengagement is related to low levels of defending. That is, that individuals who are morally disengaged are less likely to defend. We've looked at this concept a bit, and here's a graph that shows some information about why individuals who have a history of defending, that is, that they've been doing it for at least a year, why they choose to intervene. And what we find in this research done with 1,000 students aged 12 to 18 in Canada is they say things like they're more likely to intervene for moral reasons, for moral engagement reasons, that nobody deserves to be bullied. It's not fair. I wanted help. The person needed help. So what we find here is moral disengagement is associated with low levels of defending, but moral engagement is associated with higher levels of defending. And the different kinds of reasons or thinking around cognitions around why they're intervening are demonstrated in this graph. In the Lamb et al. Review, they also identified other individual factors that are related to increased likelihood of defending. And that includes social emotional learning skills, such as a higher level of social skills, increased social competence, an ability to understand others' emotions, emotional regulation, were all positively related to defending. That is, increased social skills, increased social competence, and increased understanding of other emotions was positively related to the likelihood of intervening. The other thing that we find is having self-efficacy, having confidence in your ability to defend, or the belief that you're going to be successful when defending, was also related to increased likelihood of defending. And interestingly, and surprisingly at the time, but it's a consistent effect, is that having a history of victimization is also related to defending. And it's likely because it's what we talk about it in terms of a social support hypothesis. That is, that you help each other. So kids who have victimized understand the experience. They want to help each other. They have empathy for the experience. And even though they have low peer status, they're going to step in and support their family. So in this section, I've identified what are some individual factors that are related to defending. And those are going to give us really concrete suggestions about what that means in terms of our intervention programs and our prevention programs. But first, I want to talk about the next level, which is peers. So in our socio-ecological model, we had individual factors, and there are also peer factors that are related to bullying and victimization. And the meta-analysis has shown that the type of relationship is related to your increased likelihood to bullying. So in other words, the closer you are to the person who's being victimized, the stronger the relationship you have with the person being victimized, the more likely you are to defend. So as this group shows, with just asking kids, we have about 90% of kids said that they defend someone who is a family member. About 89% said they defend a close friend. 85% said they defend a dating partner. 61% said a schoolmate, and 37% said they would defend someone that they did not know. So the takeaway from this is that this research on our 1,000 adolescents in Canada, as well as the research from the meta-analysis, indicated that if you're a friend, or you have high friend support, or if the friendship is reciprocated, you're more likely to defend that individual. The other factors that are related to defending is popularity and peer rejection. So the meta-analysis showed that more popular kids and high status youth are more likely to defend. And that's, although it was a small effect size in the meta-analysis, it's likely related to that they can do it with limited consequences to their reputation. And the third factor, and I want to talk about this, is about social norms, or what are the norms and the values of that peer group. Although this picture doesn't look clear, let me walk you through it. This is work done by Dr. Laura Lamb. And what she did is she looked at the peer networks of children, and she looked at different characteristics and how they were related to the network, and how those characteristics changed over time or were a function of socialization. So as you look at this picture, what I want you to think about, each node is a participant, and this is done in children in elementary age schools. So each line is a participant, and the lines connecting them are friendship. The size of the lines, the size of the shapes represent the behavior. So in other words, this looks at comforting. So if you look at those yellow triangles in the square, what you see is that lots of kids in the center of that network were engaging in comforting behaviors. And just for your information, if you remember, girls were more likely to engage in comforting than boys, and the girls are represented in the triangles and boys are represented in the squares. The different colors represent different age groups. So what are the messages from this slide? Three things. One, what she found was that there was a socialization effect of defending. So what does that mean? That defending related, that kids were more likely to defend if they were in a peer group where kids were defending. So in other words, defenders hung together and they influenced each other over time. So that is that the more defenders in your peer group, the more likely you were to defend, and that increased over time. So that's a really positive effect, and for when we think about intervention and what we need to do, because it says that there's a socialization effect for defending, and defending behaviors can be learned in peer groups. The third level in the reviews that were related to defending behavior, where there had been significant research, was at the school level. And what you basically find is that where there's in classrooms, where there are norms that promote defending behavior, that promote moral engagement and anti-bullying activities, and had low bullying rates, there were higher levels of defending. In other words, it was the collective classroom norms that were related to individual defending behavior. So by changing the collective classroom norms, we can increase the number of defenders and we can likely decrease the incidence of bullying. The other thing that has been found is the nature of the teacher relationships matter. So teachers who were warm and trusting and connected to their students, as well as supportive, classrooms that had teachers that were characterized in that manner had higher rates of and higher frequency of kids who were willing to defend or engaged in defending behavior. There was a surprising finding about teacher efficacy. So there is some research that shows that if teachers are highly effective at defending students, then students are less likely to do it. And so I think that speaks to, and we'll get to it in a minute, that we really need to empower the youth to defend and support them in those defending behaviors, but maybe not lead those defending behaviors. Before I go on to the implications of this, I just want to address something that's been raised in the field. And that is the issue about, should all kids become defenders? That is defending, should all kids be trained and taught to defend? Is it healthy for all kids? Or for some kids, does it come at a cost? Well, in our fMRI work with kids, what we found is that youth who had a history of defending, when they were watching cyberball, an area in the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, got lit up. In other words, there was a brain response in the area of the brain that's associated with physical pain. So youth experienced watching cyberball, in the brain with the response that you saw associated with pain. And in this case, it's psychological pain. Probably related to what we talked about earlier, is that they have a lot of empathy. So there's also research has been done on what they call the defender vulnerability hypothesis. That is that it may not be that defending is harmful for all youth. It may be harmful for only some youth. That is, youth who might have other types of vulnerability. And some of the research has found that for youth who have a prior victimization experience, when they defend, it's related to them reporting increased distress, more negative emotions, and more elevated psychological symptoms. In our own research, looking at youth in Canada, what we found is that some youth also experience increased internalizing and academic problems. So looking at this graph, when the defenders are in blue and the witness kids, so those kids who are just watching the bullying, are in red, what you see here is that the males are more likely to report internalizing symptoms and more likely to report academic problems than when they're defending versus when they're witnessing. That was not true for the females. But what was found in the females is that females were more likely to report relationship difficulties when they were defending versus not defending. So what is important here is that for some youth, that they may experience, there's a cost to defending, and especially those youth who have a history of victimization. So the message here is we have to think about who is best to defend and under what circumstances should they defend. I also want to end on this section with a little bit of a reminder that there's also youth who benefit from defending. That is, it's the defender protection hypothesis. That is, that what we find is high status and popular youth actually experience positive behaviors from defending, including increased self-esteem, increased academic achievement, and they have more optimism about the future. So defending has its costs, but it also has its benefits, and it depends on for whom. So let's take this back to what does it mean for practice, this review that I've talked about. Well, I think we have to think about the first thing that we know is we likely, when we're thinking about encouraging people to defend, we need to make sure that we start from the premise that not all students should be defenders. The second piece is that we need to have a socio-ecological approach. It's not just enough to deal with individuals and provide them with the skills that they need to be effective at defending, but we need to work with the peer group, we need to work in classrooms, and we need to support teachers. I also think that based on the skills and the peer processes that are related to defending behavior, or increasing defending behavior, it's not that we need to put new programs into school, but we rather need to increase, we need to integrate the skills and the types of interventions into programs that we already have in our schools. So that means that if we have a bullying prevention program, we need to integrate maybe and augment that material on defending. Because in that program, we're probably already dealing with the school norms, and we're probably already dealing with increasing things like empathy. I think we also need to think about that, that it's not just about promoting behaviors through programs. Often when we deliver programs in schools, we deliver it in a 45-minute period. But we need to think about how can we generalize that program beyond that. And we need to reinforce the skills that are needed to be successful to defend in our moment-to-moment interactions with children and youth. I think the other thing that we started to see from that developmental graph with age is we need to start early. We need to start early in developing the skills, in promoting attitudes that support defending kinds of behaviors. So I think some of the skills that we need to focus on aren't surprising. And these are skills that are probably already worked on in schools and just may need more focus or need to relate it to defending. So what have we learned in this review? What are the skills that we need to focus on? We need to teach kids how to regulate their emotion, how to regulate their behavior. We need to focus on empathy and perspective taking. We need to focus on moral engagement. We need to focus on an appreciation of differences and diversities. We need to help children understand and have an appreciation of their rights and responsibilities to support and include everyone. We need to focus on how to use one's power positively, because we know those high status and popular kids have power and they can use it positively to support kids who are victims by intervening. We need to focus on problem solving and moral engagement. We also need to address the peers and the social norms. We need to think about it, what happens in peer groups, what happens in classrooms. So we need to think about how do we promote the norms? And I think it's not just the peer norms, but it's also the adult norms in the school. So we need to promote norms, those collective norms that are about moral engagement, those collective norms that are pro-inclusion, those collective norms that are anti-bullying kinds of norms. And we need to focus, in focusing on those norms, we also need to identify who are the leaders or who are the youth who have power in our classrooms. And we need to give them the skills and we need to give them the message that there's not a cost to them for intervening. That's what the research is showing. And in fact, there are only positive things that happen to them. So we need to give them that message to help them engage in those behaviors and to set those norms in the peer group and in the classroom. And we need to integrate those norms beyond our bullying programs, but into all aspects of our classroom to ensure that we have the appropriate injunctive class norms. And the last piece is that we need to create caring and positive classrooms, which is really comes at the heart of creating the relationships that matter. And teachers in the classroom set that tone and set those relationships. Teachers need to be attuned to the relationships in the classroom to ensure those positive, high-status peers who have the skills are interacting and working and supporting those youth who are at risk for victimization and are sending messages within their peer group about pro-social kinds of behaviors. We need to focus, the educators need to focus on engaging those leaders in youth engagement strategies with those youth. And teachers need to have clear messages about intervening and the importance of supporting peers. So, well, there's much research to be done. For example, we need more longitudinal research looking at individuals in the context. We need to evaluate how specific effects of components of current bullying prevention programs are addressing and affecting peer defending kind of behavior. And we also need to know more about what works for whom when it comes to defending. But the bottom line is, at this point in time, we have lots of research to identify how we can support individuals in the classroom to increase their defending behavior in a safe way, and how we can set the social norms and the socialization processes in play that will ensure that we can decrease bullying in school and beyond. I just want to acknowledge all of the students and people that have been involved in the research and our Canadian team. And I'm super grateful for especially for the leadership from Dr. Laura Lamb. And I run an organization called PrevNet, which is Promoting Relationships and Eliminating Violence Network. And we have lots of resources for educators, parents, and youth about how you can engage to promote healthy relationships at your school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy Craig, for this beautiful review and summary of such a dense and huge material of research. This is really a hard work for a whole group of people who has summarized all this so beautifully in the social ecological model. And thank you for also guiding us and taking us by the hand stepwise in this review and summary. You really pointed out how complex the bullying prevention initiative needs to be, and I really take it as a home message that there is not a cost to defending. Actually, there is something very, very important that we need to talk about and to scale up now where we can stand on such massive research. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you. And hopefully we'll have the chance to see each other in person very, very soon. But thank you for concluding this on the second day of the World Anti-Bullying Forum. A warm applause to Wendy Craig and her team for all the work they have done for us. Thank you.